Court is filled to its capacity with lawyers as the court entertains an ex parte motion filed by 3 states, namely Kaduna, Kogi, and Zamfara states. The states are challenging the February 10 deadline of the Central Bank of Nigeria when the old 200 Naira, 500 Naira, and 1,000 Naira notes are expected to lose their status as legal tender. They maintain that the 10-day extension by the federal government is still insufficient to address the challenges trailing the policy. Moving the application, counsel for the applicants, Mr. Abdul Hakim Mustafa, urged the Apex Court to grant the application in the interest of justice and the well-being of Nigeria. Mr. Mustafa held that over 60% of Nigerians who do not have bank accounts do not have access to cash, and the number of citizens who do have accounts cannot access those accounts, as most of the banks have closed operations because of the policy. In its ruling, the Apex Court held that after a careful consideration of the ex parte motion, the application was granted as prayed. It made an order of interim injunction restraining the federal government through the CBN or the commercial banks from suspending or ending on January 10, 2023, the time frame within which the now older version of the 200 Naira, 500 Naira, and 1,000 Naira notes may no longer be legal tender. The Apex Court held that this would be in place pending the hearing and determination of the applicant's motion on notice for interlocutory injunction.
We invoked the powers of the Supreme Court to hear this application. The reason for it is that as well-intentioned as this policy of federal government of redesign is working hardship all over the country, as we can all see, banks are being harassed, Nigerians are suffering needlessly, especially the downtrodden. Those in the urban areas, they're having problems, but it's more excruciating at the rural area. So these 3 state governments, Kaduna, Zamfara, and Kogi, deem it fit for us to invoke the powers of Supreme Court to intervene.
The court, in its wisdom, decided that something must be done because of the urgency. But the court has acted rightly in its own wisdom, directed that all processes must be there by 15th, that is Wednesday next week, for us to argue our various positions.
The court subsequently adjourned to February 15, 2023, for hearing of the substantive suit.
Welcome back. Apologies for that mix-up there, but we do have Mr. Chukwuma Machuku, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria, I beg your pardon, yes, and former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Imo State. So apologies for that mix-up. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so many just wonder, the law. What would the law not do to us in this country? Now, I hear lawyers even argue that, wait a minute. Some say, yes, the Apex Court is in order, while others think, no, they don't think the Supreme Court should be the court of first instance for this kind of matter. They think it's the High Court. They think differently about that matter. But this is where we are today. What do you think of this?
The issue is a little bit complicated.
Oh, okay.
In that a good idea was done in a wrong way, and precipitating all these issues now. I agree. Section 251 of the Constitution said Federal High Court has exclusive jurisdiction when it comes to banking and currency. That's the Federal High Court exclusive jurisdiction. You also are aware that Section 243 of the Constitution said Supreme Court has original jurisdiction where there is an issue or dispute between state government and federal government. So, these are the things before us now. On the basis of the 251, the Federal High Court has, I think last week, issued an order against CBN.
Yeah.
So that order is still standing. And now the Supreme Court has issued an interim order. So it's a complicated matter. I think by the time on the 15th, more issues will come up. First, there will be this issue of an order. CBN is involved. If you look at Section 2, subsection 3 of the CBN Act, it made them an independent body. And then I remember this case of Jegede versus INEC relating to Ondo State governorship something, where the Supreme Court said, if you are not a party before me, an order cannot be made. So I understand that Section 20 says that you can redesign Naira without the approval by the president. The fact that the president gives approval, it is for the lawyers who now iron it out, whether it's enough to only sue the president without CBN. Because CBN is not a party in that matter of yesterday, and it cannot be. Because once a non-state actor and federal government is involved, Supreme Court will no longer have jurisdiction. So, as long as CBN is not a party in that matter, I guess some complications will be coming up.
But wait, from looking at all of these matters, as you say, complications will come up. How do you think that the courts, perhaps maybe rightly so, what kind of consideration would they give to the fact that we have an election to prosecute in less than 2-3 weeks or thereabout? So how will those expedited action happen in this case? Do you see this being concluded before the elections? Because many say that whether or not to hold elections at this stipulated time is hugely dependent on these cases.
I think when these things are coming up now, one is trying to see this issue of redesigning as a little bit what happened in 2015 of Chibok gas.
Oh.
Chibok gas. I'm sure if we don't take time, maybe the mathematics and the thinking may not be what exactly we are seeing now. Because, first and foremost, this redesigning started on October 26th. That's when the CBN governor said October 26th that is going to start the redesigning. Look at what redesigning of currency has cost in the international fora. In 2018, India started the redesigning system and gave a timeline of 16 months, or of 6 months. What did it cost? It cost the greatest havoc to the Indian economy. They were thinking of trying to shrink this money in circulation. As at the time the decision was done, 18 trillion was in circulation. By the time they finished it, 20 trillion was in circulation. So, our own is even going to be more problematic because there was no proper planning. It just started on October and said by December, new notes will come up. By January 31st, new old ones will be off circulation. That's not proper planning. I think that while we should give kudos to the governor of CBN, I think he mishandled everything. A situation where CBN is supposed to have been concentrating on the fiscal, monetary, and economic policy. The governor was busy trying to contest the election, trying to be a APC presidential candidate, a governor of CBN.
But is it
this time it was using to have done all these things could have been used in planning this thing properly.
But where do we then, the role of the institutions, because he's one person. So there's that institution of the CBN, and then you have banks as well, who are supposed to also be outlets for all of this. So when you say CBN mishandled it, is that the way it really is?
Certainly. There's no way you would have been expecting. Because I was asking me now about election. Yes, election is coming up. Yes, election is coming up. But election, it doesn't need a liquid cash for you to be doing it. If these things have been properly done, because there is also another aspect of this, the aspect of trying to draw out cash so that politicians will not go on vote buying. Vote buying has become a part and parcel of what we are going through.
That's a speculated reason.
Not speculated.
Is that, but
not speculated.
They say that that is their reason.
No. That's, whether CBN said it or not, it is a reality in our Nigerian politics. Where you now keep buying you can't buy votes with transfer. You can only do it by liquid cash. So that's what Nigeria have been going through, and we have seen it turning our voting, our electoral system into a mess. There's need to have forestalled it, but then it would have been done quite properly. It would have been done with a fine road map. As at now, starting it October, ending it to this, has brought in a lot of crisis. And CBN, you cannot say because it is only one man. Yes, it is only one man. Why do we blame the governors? Why do we blame the president if things are going wrong? The head has a control. So the fact that he was busy doing the parificated all over the place, he wants to be a presidential candidate, he wants to do this, when there is a big work to be done.
Mr. Wachuku, you know, some people have left the realm of legality now, and it looks like we're in the realm. I mean, some people will say they never saw him buy that form. Yes, there was a challenge in court, and yes, you know, the rumors were very strong that indeed he could contest. He did not end up contesting. He wasn't a part of the primaries of the APC, was he?
The fact is, look, they said you cannot worship two masters at a time. By the time you are contemplating and making efforts to buy form to become a president, there's no way you can still devote your time to what...
The point I'm making is that that is still in the realm of speculation, Mr.
I wonder.
We do not exactly have concrete facts to that effect. But, I mean, that's on the side. Let's look at the legality right now. Let's look at what it is that we have before us, which you say is very complex. Yeah. The Supreme Court has... Because they said, oh, the Supreme Court hasn't exactly decided. What it has said is stay action until the 15th of February. Is that what it is? Because this is me trying to interpret legal language into layman terms. Is that what the Supreme Court has said?
That is what it is. What they have done, what the Supreme Court has done yesterday, was to give an interim order. Interim order is just an order where the other party has not been heard. Just because of exigency. Exigency, yes. But then, I was thinking that this problem has started quite long ago. But then, the most important thing is that there is an interim order. Now for parties to come on the 15th, so all parties interested, I just heard now that even a state governor is joining. He's trying to join in the suit. The federal government is also maybe also preparing to join, or to file their papers. So, more issues will now come up. Things will now be put on the table. All the parties will now be heard. Whether the Supreme Court has jurisdiction, it will be tackled.
So, but the thing right now is, the trickiest thing right now is, as you rightly pointed out, the CBN is not a part of this suit. True or false?
It's not a part of the suit.
Exactly. And then we have a February 10 deadline looming. The February 10 deadline, or the 10-day extension, I think expires on February the 10th. But the Supreme Court has said, wait till February the 15th before. So it would seem that by some fiat, there has been an extension by default. Is that what has happened?
I'm not seeing any extension by default. I'm not seeing any extension by default. Okay. What is actually going on is issue of whether the old currency will still continue to be a legal tender or continue to be used. In the first place.
Till the 15th.
Yes.
February.
The election is coming up on the February 25th. 25th. Is INEC saying that they need raw cash?
No, INEC is not a part of this. No. I'm not talking about the elections.
Yes.
I'm talking about the deadline which the Central Bank of Nigeria set. Recall that before now, January the 31st was the deadline by which all old notes should have been out of circulation.
Correct.
And only new notes should be in use. The CBN, in its wisdom, granted an extension of 10 days.
Correct.
Now, if the 10 days expires on February the 10th, yes, February the 10th from the 31st of January, and the Supreme Court of Nigeria is saying that we will hear the matter on the 15th of February, hasn't that granted an extension by default? That's the question I'm asking.
It has granted extension. It has granted an extension. Maybe not by default, but maybe not use your language by default. The Supreme Court has given an order. All it means now is, if on the 15th, the Supreme Court hears and determines that CBN is right, of course, automatically, as at the time of the judgment of the Supreme Court, the order of CBN goes in and continues.
Because some people will say that this is very tricky, knowing that the CBN is not a part of that suit, cannot be a part of the suit by the 15th. The legal opinion that said that order given by the Supreme Court is of no effect that it has, because the CBN is an independent and autonomous institution.
I think I would not really toe that line, because the principle that a court order, no matter how silly it is, stands until it is set aside. All we can do is, by the time federal government comes into the matter, he will now play out his card by saying, the order you are given, I might not be able to carry it out. The organ that ought to do it is not before you. It has to be canvassed, and the court has to rule on it. But we cannot say, because the CBN is not there, and then it should ignore the Supreme Court. I cannot canvass for that.
So in other words,
so what we're saying is, it is until 15th, when the whole thing is brought before the Supreme Court. Probably by the time this issue, the order was made, maybe that argument of CBN not being a party was not canvassed before it. Maybe there were some other exigencies that were pulling. So one cannot please say, CBN, go on with your
whether or not
start to breeding anarchy, and you cannot spite Supreme Court.
So that then means literally out there on the streets, after February 10, people can still go on utilizing the old Naira. It is still a legal tender.
That is what the Supreme Court just said yesterday.
All right, let's bring in our colleagues from Lagos.
All right, Mr. Machukume, good morning, sir. I noted that you argued to the point, or you clarified the point about how the Supreme Court can rule on matters relating to, or that have to do with the federal and state government. But when it comes to currency, it has to do with the High Court. It's the High Court that has the jurisdiction. I hope I'm not mistaking on that. And in relation to that, this matter is between the federal and state governments to the extent that it has to do with the country's legal tender. And it has come in some sort of conflict between the federal and state government. So to that extent, does it fall within the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court?
You see, it was like an argument that happened some time ago. You see, the Federal High Court has no jurisdiction over land. But there was this argument that if there is an issue of liquidation, which is exclusive jurisdiction of the Federal High Court, whatever that comes in within the baggage of that liquidation, and eventually inures a jurisdiction to the Federal High Court. Yes, I said the issue of currency and this thing is that of exclusive jurisdiction of Federal High Court. But here is a situation where the state is having a dispute with the federal government. Unfortunately, the three states are all APC states, but that's a different ballgame altogether. Now the states are saying they have a dispute by the exclusive jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, or original jurisdiction. Once there is a dispute between a state and federal government, no matter the nature of the dispute, it has to be tabled before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has to decide on that. So what we are having now is a little bit conflict, but it does not mean that by the time they canvass it in the Supreme Court, by the time all the parties are before the Supreme Court, then the decision will be made, whether that is on the basis of that, of the dispute between just the states, the federal government, the Supreme Court will have a jurisdiction on it or not. So it has to be decided. I'm sure it is one of the issues that will be burning before the court on the 15th.
Speaking of issues, the Federal Capital Territory High Court has ruled that the CBN should not interfere with that February 10 deadline. That would seem a ruling at variance with the Supreme Court. How is it going to play out?
That of the district came first in time. The dispute in the matter in Supreme Court was not on by the time the court gave that order. The FCT High Court court gave that order. So I do not think the court didn't want to face Supreme Court because there was no dispute to the much I know. There was no matter pending in Supreme Court by the time that order was made. We became aware of this matter yesterday after the ruling. So I'm not too sure that there is insubordination or whatever as regards that.
Now, if the current...
I wonder whether if that matter was also cited to the court by the time the order was made yesterday. I think all this will play out on the 15th.
Okay, so if the currency continues to be...
on the table.
If the old notes continue to be legal tender after February the 10th, would it constitute an issue at the Supreme Court on the 15th of the February, at least by the defendant?
You see, the Supreme Court has given an order. I don't see anywhere any person can start talking about the old note not being a legal tender anymore, because there is a court order saying continue to use it until 15th, when everybody will be heard. So on the basis of that, I'm not seeing any controversy on that. And the court order has been made, and it has to be obeyed. So there's a court order.
How then do you situate the position of the AGF's counsel, where they said in response to that Supreme Court ruling that the claims or reliefs are not against the Federation, but the federal government and its agency, the CBN. The federal government of Nigeria is distinct from the Federation or the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The plaintiffs have no grievance whatsoever against the Federation of Nigeria. Help us understand that.
It's another version of the story. But being a version does not take the whole day. The people that went to the court also have their own arguments. It is until when these are canvassed before the court, and the court hears them, and the court will not do a determination. So it will not be proper for me to start a review on a matter that is already before the Supreme Court. It is until that one is these things are canvassed, then the court will take a decision. So on the 15th, these things will come on the table.
Is against the background of the fact that as at this moment, there is still that confusion, or as some newspapers put it, division between whether or not the Naira, the old Naira notes remain legal tender beyond February 10. So especially, again, because as you just rightly heard and which you're aware of, the federal government has also gone to the same Supreme Court to tender this particular thing that we just cited to you through its counsels. So to that effect,
Is this, and there are those who would also wonder, okay, so the CBN is not joined in this case, but the federal government, headed by the president, who is the boss of the CBN, is joined in this case. What does that imply to, is it an order, direct or indirect order to the CBN?
Yes, I think I tried to analyze this at the early time. I'm not very sure that the president is the boss of CBN. I think that because if you look at Section 2, Section 1, Subsection 3 of the CBN Act, it says the CBN is an independent body. But then, Section 20 says if you want to redesign and withdraw, you just have to look for approval. When you get the approval, I think that is only just to give a skeletal approval. It does not go into saying this is the time lag, the timeline. I think the timeline issue, which is what is burning now, is exclusive jurisdiction of the CBN. Issue of timeline is exclusive jurisdiction of the CBN. And that's where I am thinking that on the 15th, maybe the solicitors to the federal government, the counsels for the federal government, will now come up with all these arguments. But as at now, there is a court order that said the old Naira notes continues to be a legal tender until 15th, when matters are now put before, completely and comprehensively put before the Supreme Court.
Okay, just to be clear, the CBN, if you say that the CBN governor is, the president is not the CBN governor's boss, to whom then does the CBN governor report? Who monitors the activities of the CBN? And you rightly put it that unless the president approves the Naira or currency change, it cannot happen. If the president disapproves, is it possible for the CBN governor to continue?
No, said he must have to sort his approval. And having sought it and it's given,
what if it's not given? What if the approval is not given? What if the approval is not given by the president?
I remember when there's this issue of when the Federal Minister of Finance said my approval was not sought, I think CBN made a comment, a press release, and said, I only needed the president's approval. And the approval had been given. So having gotten the approval to redesign and to withdraw the old notes, it is now for CBN now to set the timeline for doing all this. It is not the redesigning that is in dispute now. It's not the withdrawal that is in dispute now. What is in dispute, what is burning now is timeline. Timeline, which is exclusive jurisdiction or the decision of the CBN. It is the timeline that is burning now. It is the timeline that went to Supreme Court, not the approval to redesign or withdraw.
Well, it will seem that
so
all of the issues are.
I'm thinking that
it will seem like all of the issues are connected, timeline or the redesign. But is there anything? Please clarify for us, Senior Advocate. Is there anything in the CBN Act that compels the Apex Bank to allow the old and the new currencies run concurrently until the old currencies are withdrawn from circulation over a period of time? I ask this because, you know, many would cite how in Western countries that is the case, and how old notes, you know, even from you know, past regimes, remain legal tender even now.
Yes. I thank you for that comment. Very brilliant one. But let me get you to U.S. started their redesigning in 2011 and is going to come on stream in 2026, 15 years. That's where things are properly planned. The CBN has the power to set their timeline what I have been saying is this thing was done a little bit in a hurry. This thing would have been started quite long ago. And most importantly, the problem of at the rural area, I don't think people factor them in. There should have been a situation where these POS and all the rest of them, the rural area should have been, sensitized properly enough so that this process will go seamless. The CBN has the power, but the power has to be used with common sense so that a crisis of this nature will not come up. A situation where the money is printed and you don't know where they are, it doesn't show good supervision. You are talking about, right now, what the CBN is saying is that out of 3.23 trillion of cash, 2.73 are off the bank votes. 2.73 trillion are not within the banking sector. And this is what is creating the problem, which they want to withdraw, so that it will not be available to corrupt politicians who want to use it in buying the votes. We cannot continue this idea of vote buying. Vote buying is ruining our economy, is ruining our political system, is ruining the developmental efforts. Wrong politicians come into office because they have cash to buy votes. So, why this design, I think, was meant to attack this, I think also there should have been an arrangement to have done it in a more properly orderly way.
What would the orderly way be?
The orderly way should have been to have started it quite early and then to monitor the way the money is going and to make sure that the rural area also are brought into this cashless economy. The POS is now sent into the rural area, and then they will be educated and informed on how to use them. After all, the money is still yours, whether you use it in cash or use it by cash transfer. It's still yours. That's why this issue of when there was this argument of whether the federal government, the CBN should monitor how states hoard their money, doesn't make good sense. You cannot, because it is your money, you continue to hold billions in cash. How does it make sense? Look, because of this cash transfer, armed robbery on the road, stopping vehicles, stopping luxurious box has stopped. Because people are no longer carrying cash. If you stop them, all they will tell you is there's no cash with them.
Yeah, but
and armed robbery along the road has stopped.
But they started kidnapping the people.
Now, I think if we manage this thing very well, when the cash is not there, and you know that no matter what you do, the gentleman, he has want to give you, but he cannot give you, he doesn't have the cash to give you. And by the time he does a transfer, it becomes traceable. Some of this problem may wither away. You don't see so much of this in the Western world because they have taken care of transfer. Let us inculcate it.
Yeah, as we wind down on this one, from your wealth of experience and knowledge, you've talked about so many complications will come up. What do you see happening at the end of the day?
What do
you see happening at the end of the day?
You see, that's why I brought in this issue of the ugly incidents of Chibok gas. Chibok gas was used to do the election of 2015. Chibok gas.
How do you mean?
Yes. Chibok gas was used to do the election of 2015.
Human beings.
Chibok gas.
Are you saying that politicians kidnap them?
The kidnapping of Chibok gas was aimed at 2015.
How is that connected with this one?
I hope the crisis brewing, the crisis coming up from this cash management, this cash, the design and the rest of them, it's not meant to achieve an ulterior motive for 2000.
Are you saying they're using the courts, or the courts pliable?
Whatever. I mean, when people plan, they plan it and they execute it and whatever. We didn't know what Chibok gas was all about until after the election. I do hope that this issue of redesigning will be properly managed in such a way that the sovereignty of Nigerian voters will not be taken away.
So we cannot exactly tell how
where this
the
thing is going. We cannot, no.
All right, Mr. Chukwuma Machukwume is a senior advocate of Nigeria, former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice for Imo State. Thank you for coming on, and all the best, sir.
Very grateful for having me.
We will be back in